Road verges are unloved, unfunctional places, but nature can thrive on them. That's why I love them. They're a brilliant example of how nature doesn't need things to be perfect. It's often said that we've lost 97% of our wildflower meadows in the UK since the 1930s. Road verges can make up for some of those lost meadows, especially if we look after them better. They've become an important refuge for wildlife. There are 500,000 kilometres of road verge in the UK. If you add them all together, they cover an area the size of Dorset. I've always enjoyed painting nature and painting plants in particular. But I always like it to be in the context of the human world, because that's how we mostly experience nature. We very rarely see a place that is totally pristine. More often we'll see a park, the side of a road, or a tree as we're walking along. Nature all mixed up in the everyday world, and that's what really inspires me. Is nature doesn't actually need things to be perfect. Nature is growing all around us in very ordinary places. I first started noticing road verges when I was out hiking one spring. I'm always on the lookout for painting ideas. I was in the South Downs walking through huge fields looking for flowers to paint, but I couldn't find any. And then I had to cross a dual carriageway, the A24, and there were hundreds of cowslips in bloom right next to the road. After that, I started noticing wildflowers along our road network. Not just on the verges themselves, but on roundabouts and junctions, and in lay-bys and at car parks and petrol stations. There's loads of these spaces whose only role in the human world is to separate one place from another. There's a whole network out there of wild spaces that brings wildlife into our towns and cities and helps wildlife to move across the country. Many plants I've seen for the first time on a road verge. I haven't seen them in the wild. I've seen them on a roundabout or in a lay-by. I saw my first ever bee orchid on a roundabout in Arundel, and I've seen Viper's bugloss growing beside the A21, and another little plant, a little pink plant, common centauri, also growing right next to the road. None of those I've seen before. So wherever I'm going, I sneak in little photography stops. I've become rather fond of my local A road, which is the A21. The more I've looked, the more I've noticed. There's some fabulous plants hiding next to the road bridges there. There's a whole area of meadow that was created a few years ago when the road was remodelled. And it's a fantastic meadow. So I spend a lot of time on the A21 along it. I have my favourite spots. I've started to sit and paint in those places, and I take a lot of photographs. I like to keep visiting just to see what's going on and what's new, because it goes through many different changes of plants during the season. I think wildlife thrives on road verges because road verges are by and large left alone. They're not places that we want to be. We want to go past them as quickly as possible. I make my small landscape paintings outside, but I make bigger work in the studio. Once I started noticing the plants which grow on road verges, I also started noticing the signs which are there too. The road signs themselves have become part of my work. When we're travelling, road signs are so familiar. But when they're out of context, there's something I really like about them. When I find a sign that I really like, I like the message on, I like to go and measure the sign. It sounds ridiculous, but to measure the sign and to reproduce it exactly in the dimensions on an offcut of metal. And I'll take photos of the plants that are actually growing around that sign and incorporate them into the design so that the plants and the sign often go together. When I started making the road signs, it felt like a number of things in my life had all come together at last. My love of plants, my love of painting, and my concern for the environment and what we're doing to the natural world, it all came together in this body of work. As I paint, some of the leaves start to grow over the letters on the road sign. It's like when you forget something on the ground for a long time. The plants will grow round it and through it. They start to accommodate it. In my paintings, it's like the plants are starting to reclaim our words, our instructions. Maybe it's a comment on how we live our lives and how we treat nature, or maybe it's just plants doing what they do. I think nature can thrive in our human world if we welcome it in. All the road verges and car parks and little spaces could be brilliant wildlife habitat. They could be mini meadows and pocket woodlands, with ponds and hedges, with blossom and fruit and places to nest and hide. Places for birds and beetles. Places for dragonflies and bees. Nature can thrive alongside us. We just need to change our priorities.